Ladies and gentlemen, imagine walking into a room and feeling like you're suffocating, not from a lack of air, but from the weight of someone's presence. Their words pierce through you like daggers. Their gaze makes you question your worth, and suddenly you're left wondering, am I losing myself? You aren't alone if you've ever felt this way. Sometimes the demons in our lives aren't cloaked in shadows or legends. Sometimes they wear the faces of those we love most, our family. Yes, families are supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of comfort, love, and support. But what happens when that sanctuary becomes a battleground where emotional wounds are deeper than any physical scar? What happens when the people who should lift you up instead tear you down, manipulating your every move and turning love into something that feels like a curse? It's not just hurtful, it's demonic. The demons in families aren't always the obvious ones. They're not always seen in overt acts of cruelty or physical abuse. Often they hide in plain sight, disguised as normal family interactions, as just how things are. But the truth is, some family members become toxic. They use their power over you to control, isolate, and manipulate. It's not an easy thing to accept, but it's a reality many face. One of the clearest signs that you may be dealing with these demonic traits is the constant emotional manipulation. Ever feel like you're walking on eggshells, afraid that every word you speak might trigger a storm? This is the work of psychological manipulation. A family member may twist the truth, guilt trip you, or use emotional blackmail to control your decisions. They know exactly how to make you feel small or insignificant, often leaving you to question your reality. Another warning sign is isolation. They'll work to separate you from the people you love or the support systems you need. The "we're family, no one else matters" tactic is powerful, and before you know it, you're in a cocoon of emotional prison, alone, confused, and cut off from the world. It's a method used by demons that thrive on your vulnerability, seeking to isolate you to ensure their control remains unchallenged. Then there's gaslighting. It's one of the most insidious forms of manipulation. You know it when you start doubting your own memories, your own feelings, because someone in your family repeatedly denies your experiences or tries to convince you that you're crazy. Their words linger in your mind. You're overreacting, or that never happened. It's the slow erosion of your own sense of reality, and it's not just hurtful, it's terrifying. And let's not forget narcissism. The narcissistic family member doesn't care about your feelings unless they serve their own needs. They demand your attention, your affection, and your loyalty, but when it comes time for them to reciprocate, they turn cold, distant, or indifferent. They take without ever giving. The emotional toll is heavy, leaving you constantly drained and questioning your own worth. But why should we care? Why is it so important to recognize these signs? Because if left unchecked, these toxic behaviors erode not only your spirit, but your entire sense of self. Over time, they become a part of the fabric of your life. And you begin to believe that it's normal to feel worthless, unworthy of love, or always in the wrong. You begin to carry the weight of someone else's demons, and they suffocate your soul. The real tragedy is that these behaviors often remain unchallenged. Families are supposed to be the ones who protect you, but when they become the source of your pain, the solution is not to suffer in silence. It's to stand up, to speak your truth, and to understand that it's okay to walk away from toxic dynamics, even if they are within your own family. The first step in reclaiming your power is recognizing that demons are not always external. Sometimes they reside within the walls of the home, hidden behind smiles and words that wound. But if we are aware of the signs, if we refuse to accept behavior that breaks us down, we can begin to heal. When we think about family, we often envision it as a haven, a place of unconditional love and support. It's where we are meant to feel safe, understood, and cherished. Yet for some, family can become the source of their greatest pain and emotional turmoil. Among the most insidious aspects of toxic family dynamics are the subtle and manipulative behaviors that can feel like an invisible force controlling the atmosphere, like an invisible demon lurking in the background. One such behavior is psychological manipulation, which can manifest in a range of ways, all of which leave the victim feeling confused, vulnerable, and powerless. Psychological manipulation in its most dangerous form often begins slowly and insidiously, masking itself as concern, advice, or even help. A family member might start by offering suggestions or opinions, only to twist them over time into demands or ultimatums. It starts off small. Perhaps you're told that something you did was wrong, but they'll soften it by saying, "I was just trying to help." However, over time, this help turns into something else entirely. What began as guidance becomes a series of small, seemingly innocuous criticisms or comments designed to make you doubt your own thoughts, actions, and decisions. At the core of psychological manipulation is the desire to control, to shift the victim's perception of reality. The manipulator employs subtle techniques that erode self-confidence and instill feelings of guilt or inadequacy. Over time, this takes a toll on the victim's mental health. For instance, a manipulative family member might regularly belittle your choices, dismiss your emotions, or undermine your opinions, leaving you questioning your own judgment. They might act as though their perspective is the only valid one, making you feel that your beliefs or desires are not only wrong, but irrational. A common tactic in this kind of manipulation is the constant invalidation of your feelings. Imagine, for example, that you express frustration or sadness about something that happened, only for the manipulator to brush it off, telling you that you're being overly sensitive or that you're overreacting. They may even say something like, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this? It's nothing," which diminishes your emotions and makes you feel embarrassed or even guilty for feeling upset. Slowly, you begin to internalize the idea that your feelings don't matter, that they're insignificant or unwarranted, which can lead to emotional withdrawal and self-doubt. Another powerful element of psychological manipulation in families is the manipulation of guilt. The manipulator might use guilt as a weapon, making you feel responsible for their emotions, well-being, or problems. For example, they may say, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" Or, "I guess you don't care about me anymore, do you?" Such statements are designed to make you feel guilty for simply having needs or desires that conflict with the manipulator's expectations. Over time, the manipulator creates an emotional dependency where you begin to feel obligated to cater to their wishes, often at the expense of your own happiness and peace of mind. What makes this psychological manipulation particularly damaging is that it's often so subtle that you don't immediately recognize it for what it is. It's not loud or overt, it's quiet and gradual, like a slow drip eroding a rock. The manipulator may convince you that you're the one causing the problems, that you're too sensitive, too emotional, or even too selfish. They may repeatedly claim that they have your best interests at heart, that their manipulations are just for your own good, but in reality, they are controlling the relationship by forcing you to believe that you are the one who is wrong, irrational, or ungrateful. Another disturbing tactic that often accompanies psychological manipulation is the use of threats, whether direct or indirect. These threats are not always obvious, but they're designed to control your actions and behavior by invoking fear. A manipulative family member might say things like, "If you leave the family gathering, I'll be heartbroken," or, "I guess you're not the person I thought you were." These statements are designed to guilt trip you into doing what they want, making you feel like you have no choice but to comply for fear of losing love, affection, or approval. In these instances, the manipulator is exploiting your fear of rejection or disappointment, keeping you bound to their needs and desires. The ultimate danger of psychological manipulation within a family is that it not only affects your emotional well-being, but also your sense of self. Constantly being told that your feelings and needs are unimportant chips away at your confidence, self-esteem, and autonomy. Eventually, the victim starts to lose sight of who they are, what they truly want, and what makes them happy. They become conditioned to think that their worth is determined by others' approval, and that their emotions and opinions are secondary to those around them. This manipulation may not always be intentional. Sometimes the manipulator may genuinely believe that their actions are helping or protecting you. However, the end result is still the same, an environment where control, guilt, and invalidation take precedence over respect, love, and emotional safety. The longer this behavior goes unchecked, the more difficult it becomes for the victim to break free, as they've been trained to doubt themselves and their perceptions of reality. In the end, recognizing psychological manipulation is the first step toward healing. It may be difficult to accept that someone you love is capable of using these tactics against you, but acknowledging the problem is the beginning of regaining control over your own life. Understanding the signs of psychological manipulation allows you to set boundaries, protect your emotional well-being, and begin to rebuild your confidence and sense of self-worth. It's crucial to remember that you deserve respect, validation, and love, not manipulation. Breaking free from such toxic family dynamics takes time, courage, and self-compassion, but it's a necessary step toward reclaiming your peace of mind and your future. Isolation is one of the most effective yet insidious tools used by manipulative and toxic family members. It can start innocuously with small requests or seemingly innocent suggestions. But over time, this pattern grows and intensifies, isolating the individual from their support systems, friends, and even their sense of self. In the context of family, isolation often isn't about physical separation alone. It's about emotional and mental alienation. A subtle but powerful way of maintaining control over someone's life by eroding their connections to the outside world. The isolator in this case isn't simply attempting to physically keep someone away from others. They are trying to break down the support structures that would otherwise allow the individual to resist the toxic influences of their family member. The isolation begins in ways that seem unremarkable. A family member might express concern over a relationship you have, claiming that the person you are spending time with is bad for you or doesn't care about you. This might seem like simple advice, and initially you may brush it off. But over time, this concern turns into more frequent remarks, gradually making you question your friends or loved ones. planting seeds of doubt about their intentions or reliability. What seemed like a protective gesture turns into a form of control, slowly chipping away at your ability to trust your judgment or your relationships. As you start to believe these warnings, you may begin to distance yourself from people you once cared about, making decisions based on a perception created not by you, but by the manipulative family member. The next stage of isolation often involves the manipulation of your time and emotional energy. A toxic family member may demand so much of your attention that you have little left for anyone else. They may create situations where you feel guilty for spending time with friends, framing it as though you are neglecting your family obligations. For example, they might say things like, if you cared about the family, you wouldn't spend all your time out with others. Or, we always come second to your friends. This emotional guilt trip is designed to make you feel like you're selfish or disloyal for seeking any kind of companionship outside the family unit. As a result, you find yourself spending more and more time with the person who is isolating you, cutting off your interactions with others and reinforcing the idea that your family should be your only source of support. The longer this goes on, the more dependent you become on this person for validation and emotional needs. Over time, the manipulator ensures that you believe there is no one left to rely on but them. They make you feel that their way is the only way, and that you are ultimately responsible for maintaining the family dynamic, even if it comes at the cost of your happiness. In more extreme cases, isolation can also take the form of emotional manipulation, where a family member will use emotional threats to control your behavior. They might accuse you of abandoning them or being ungrateful for the sacrifices they've made for you. These kinds of threats can invoke guilt and fear, and they serve to keep you within the confines of their emotional reach. They may say things like, if you leave, I don't know how I'll cope, or you're the only one who understands me, and I can't lose you. These statements play on your empathy and can make you feel obligated to stay involved, not because you want to, but because you are led to believe you are the only one who can provide the support they need. While this emotional manipulation can leave you feeling trapped, it's not always so overt. Sometimes isolation occurs under the guise of concern for your well-being or the need to protect you from outside influences. A family member might begin to criticize your social circle, questioning their intentions, or even making false claims about them. In doing so, they create a false narrative in which you are made to feel that your friends or acquaintances are the ones who are dangerous, and that only your family truly has your best interests at heart. This is especially damaging because it undermines your ability to trust your own perceptions and decisions, creating an atmosphere where every relationship, every action, and every conversation is questioned and scrutinized. What makes this form of isolation so harmful is its subtlety and the deep emotional toll it takes. Unlike overt forms of control, such as physical confinement or threats, emotional isolation isn't something that can easily be seen or identified. It wears you down over time, making you question your own instincts, your loyalty to others, and even your worth. As your relationships with the outside world diminish, you may begin to believe that there is no one who truly understands you except for the manipulative family member. This is the heart of their control. They replace any external influences, support systems, or self-assurance with their own influence, creating a dependency that is incredibly difficult to break. In the long run, the effects of this emotional and psychological isolation are deeply destructive. Without the support of friends, peers, or mentors, the victim of isolation often becomes more isolated in every sense, cut off from potential sources of help, perspective, and guidance. Their world becomes smaller, centered only on the manipulative family member, leaving them unable to see the broader picture of how damaging this isolation is to their emotional health and well-being. Isolation, when executed through these various means, takes a heavy toll on one's mental state. It erodes self-esteem, fosters dependency, and places an emotional burden that can feel crushing. It's only when the individual is able to recognize the patterns and gain enough perspective to see beyond the toxic family dynamic that they can begin to take steps toward breaking free from this isolation. However, recognizing the signs and understanding the mechanisms of isolation within family dynamics is not easy, especially when those involved are people we trust or love. It's a painful and often slow process of rediscovery and rebuilding, but it is possible to reclaim one's sense of independence and emotional health. Gaslighting is one of the most manipulative and devastating behaviors that can occur within families, and it often goes unnoticed until the damage is deep. It is a psychological tactic that involves denying, distorting, or twisting the truth to confuse and undermine someone's perception of reality. The essence of gaslighting is that the manipulator makes the victim question their own thoughts, memories, and experiences. This emotional manipulation is often so subtle that the victim begins to doubt their sanity, which leaves them feeling disoriented, anxious, and powerless. In the context of family, where trust and emotional safety should be foundational, gaslighting can have particularly harmful effects, making it hard for the victim to know who to trust, even their own sense of self. The process of gaslighting starts slowly. Initially, it can seem harmless. Perhaps a family member will dismiss a memory you have or make light of something that you found important. For example, they might say, "I don't remember it that way," or "You're just making a big deal out of nothing." These seemingly small comments plant the first seeds of doubt, which may cause you to question whether your perception is correct. At first, these dismissals may seem trivial or inconsequential, but over time, they accumulate. The manipulator continues to subtly rewrite history, suggesting that your recollection is flawed or that your feelings are exaggerated. As this behavior continues, it escalates. The gaslighter may go beyond simple dismissals and begin to make more aggressive attacks on your sense of reality. They might outright deny events that occurred, even when you know them to be true. For instance, if you remember a particular conversation or event clearly, the gaslighter may insist, "That never happened," or "You're imagining things." When this happens repeatedly, you may start to feel confused, unsure of your own memories. This confusion is exactly what the manipulator is seeking to achieve: to destabilize you emotionally and psychologically by causing you to doubt your own experiences. What makes gaslighting so toxic within families is the trust that should be inherent in those relationships. Family is where we expect to be seen, heard, and supported. But when gaslighting enters the equation, this sense of security is shattered. A family member who engages in gaslighting may not be outright cruel. In fact, they might present themselves as caring or concerned. They may justify their manipulative behavior by claiming they're just looking out for you or wanting what's best for you. This adds an extra layer of confusion, as it's difficult to reconcile the loving image of a family member with their behavior that undermines your reality. Gaslighting can also be more covert, happening in ways that make the victim feel paranoid or self-conscious. The gaslighter might say something like, "Are you sure you're okay? You've been acting weird lately." Or, "I don't think you're seeing things clearly." These comments make you second-guess yourself. You start to wonder if you really are acting weird or if you're overreacting to situations. This constant self-doubt erodes your confidence and creates an emotional dependency on the manipulator as you begin to rely on them to tell you what's real and what isn't. The manipulator's goal is simple. They want to control the narrative, so they dictate how you perceive situations, people, and even yourself. What's even more dangerous is that gaslighting often isn't limited to a single family member. It can become a pattern, and other family members may either unknowingly support the gaslighter or be too intimidated to challenge them. When multiple people are involved, it becomes even more difficult for the victim to stand up for themselves. The sense of isolation intensifies because the victim may feel like they're the only one who sees the truth, but everyone else seems to side with the manipulator. The victim's emotional response, whether it's frustration, confusion, or sadness, becomes a source of further manipulation, as the gaslighter can then claim that they're only trying to help or getting frustrated because you won't listen. This constant emotional turmoil makes it harder for the victim to maintain healthy boundaries as the lines between truth and distortion blur. The gaslighter exploits the victim's vulnerability and often uses their emotional sensitivity to gain power. If the victim tries to assert themselves, the gaslighter will twist their words, making them seem overreactive or unreasonable. This results in a cycle of self-doubt, where the victim feels they can't trust themselves or their instincts. It's emotionally exhausting and over time can leave the victim feeling completely powerless and mentally drained. The psychological damage caused by gaslighting can extend far beyond the immediate family dynamic. Victims of gaslighting often begin to experience heightened anxiety, depression, and a lack of self-worth. They become hypervigilant, constantly on edge, wondering if what they perceive as truth is actually a lie. In extreme cases, the victim may even begin to lose their sense of identity altogether, as they are no longer able to distinguish between the reality they experience and the reality imposed on them by the gaslighter. This deep sense of confusion and emotional instability can have long-lasting effects, making it difficult for the individual to function in other areas of their life, such as work, friendships, and even future relationships. Gaslighting is a deeply destructive form of emotional abuse that can slowly dismantle a person's mental health and their understanding of their place in the world. It is particularly harmful in family situations where the victim may feel trapped because the family is often seen as the place where trust and unconditional love should prevail. In the face of gaslighting, the victim is left questioning everything except the manipulator's version of events. It's crucial for victims of gaslighting to recognize these tactics and take steps to distance themselves from the manipulator. This might mean seeking professional help, relying on outside support systems, or simply reclaiming their own narrative. But the key is understanding that their perception of reality is valid and that they deserve to be treated with respect and honesty. Emotional blackmail is a powerful and dangerous form of manipulation that can thrive within families. It involves using a person's emotions, whether fear, guilt, love, or even confusion, as leverage to control or manipulate their actions. The person engaging in emotional blackmail often uses emotional tactics to pressure the victim into doing what they want. The manipulator often presents these demands as something that is for the good of the family, masking them as acts of love, concern, or care. The victim is left in a difficult position, feeling torn between the desire to stand up for themselves and the overwhelming emotional pressure placed on them. One of the primary tools of emotional blackmail is guilt. A manipulative family member may make the victim feel as though they are obligated to comply with demands, often by reminding them of past sacrifices or creating the illusion that the family member is in distress. This could look like a parent saying, "After everything I've done for you, is this how you repay me? Or you don't care about me at all, do you?" Such statements evoke a deep sense of guilt, making the victim feel that refusing the request would be selfish, ungrateful, or unloving. The manipulator uses this guilt to create an emotional bind, forcing the victim to either comply with their demands or face the consequences of feeling responsible for the other person's distress. The emotional blackmailer may also use fear as a tactic to get what they want, by threatening consequences, such as withdrawing affection, abandoning the victim, or even threatening to harm themselves. The manipulator makes the victim feel that their compliance is necessary to avoid a dire outcome. For example, a manipulative family member might say, "If you don't do this for me, I don't know how I'll cope," or "You'll regret it if you don't help me." These statements prey on the victim's fear of rejection, loss, or guilt. The manipulator knows that the victim's love and desire for approval will often outweigh their own boundaries, pushing them to act out of fear rather than out of genuine desire to help or comply. Another form of emotional blackmail can involve the manipulation of love itself. The manipulator may threaten to withdraw their love or affection if the victim doesn't meet their demands. In many family relationships, the bond of love is a powerful force, and to suggest that love is conditional or can be withdrawn is a deeply destabilizing tactic. The emotional blackmailer might say things like, "If you loved me, you would do this," or "I guess you don't care about me enough to help." This creates a situation where the victim feels that their love is being held hostage, and the only way to prove their worth or love is to comply with the manipulator's wishes. Over time, this can lead to a pattern of behavior where the victim constantly tries to meet the emotional demands of the manipulator to avoid the pain of rejection or the withdrawal of affection. In some cases, emotional blackmail may involve playing the victim, where the manipulator feigns vulnerability or hardship to gain sympathy and manipulate the victim into meeting their demands. The manipulator might say things like, "I don't know how I'll survive without you," or "I'm the only one who has ever been there for you, and now you're abandoning me." This tactic creates a false sense of obligation, making the victim feel as though they owe the manipulator something, regardless of how unreasonable the demands are. The emotional blackmailer might also play on the victim's own sense of responsibility or desire to be seen as a caring family member, making it seem like it's their duty to sacrifice their own needs to accommodate the demands. What makes emotional blackmail especially harmful in family dynamics is the deep bond that family members often share. The manipulator plays on these deep emotional connections, making it much harder for the victim to recognize the manipulation for what it is. Family members are often seen as people we can trust, and this trust can be used against the victim. The constant emotional pressure creates confusion as the victim struggles to differentiate between what is truly for their own well-being and what is being asked for out of selfishness. They might feel as though they are being unreasonable if they question the motives of the family member, even when those motives are clearly self-serving. Over time, the victim of emotional blackmail may begin to lose their sense of autonomy, feeling as though they are constantly walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting the manipulative family member. Their boundaries become more blurred, and they may feel like they have no choice but to comply, even if it comes at the expense of their own happiness or well-being. This cycle of compliance, guilt, and fear can lead to a gradual erosion of self-esteem, as the victim begins to internalize the manipulator's narrative that their needs and desires are less important than those of the manipulator. The lasting impact of emotional blackmail is significant. Victims often feel drained, confused, and resentful. The relationship becomes one-sided, with the victim constantly trying to meet the demands of the manipulator while sacrificing their own emotional health. This dynamic can lead to long-term emotional damage, including feelings of depression, anxiety, and a diminished sense of self-worth. The victim may also find it difficult to trust others or maintain healthy boundaries in future relationships, as they have been conditioned to put others' needs above their own. Ultimately, emotional blackmail within families is a dangerous tool that can destroy relationships and leave deep emotional scars. The manipulator's ability to use emotions as a weapon creates an environment where the victim feels trapped, unable to assert their own needs or desires without fearing the emotional fallout. Recognizing emotional blackmail is the first step toward breaking free from this toxic dynamic. With time and support, it is possible for victims to reclaim their boundaries, rebuild their self-esteem, and learn to prioritize their own emotional health without fear of manipulation. In conclusion, spotting the demons within a family requires vigilance, self-awareness, and the courage to acknowledge and address toxic behaviors, whether it's isolation, gaslighting, or emotional blackmail. These manipulative tactics can leave lasting scars and erode one's sense of self. But by recognizing the signs, standing firm in your boundaries, and seeking the support you deserve, it is possible to break free from these destructive cycles. Families should be places of love, trust, and support, not manipulation or control. Remember, your mental and emotional well-being are just as important as any relationship, and it's okay to step back from negativity in order to protect your peace. Good luck on your journey to healing, and remember to always trust your instincts. Thank you for your attention, and may you find the strength to cultivate healthier, more supportive environments in your life.